Well, first of all, I would of course like to thank SASNET and Lars and Anna and all those who've been involved in organizing this conference for inviting me here, giving me the opportunity to share some work which I have been doing. When I was thinking about what I should speak on, I was constantly debating between two different things. One is around work which I've been doing on the political and social economy of care in India, and the other was around work which I've been doing on love, marriage, and desire. And in consultation with Lars, I have to say I opted for the second topic. Now, without more to do, I'm going to start on what I have to say. And I'm going to read it so that I do try and keep time. Sociology and social anthropology have long taken marriage to be an institution, a structured set of social relations that are framed in and shape social norms and values, and structural relations beyond their own particularity. A marriage entails a public accord to a private relationship, a public recognition and formalization that bring into concert the private desires of two people with social and public life, be the desires ever so diverse, possibly unequal and incommensurate, but where intimacy is assumed. This can be argued even in those contexts in which sociologists have argued that marriage is no longer a social institution, but merely a social relation, as in many European societies. Where individualization and free choice are hegemonic in values, desires and the intimacy sought may have shifted, perhaps radically. Yet marriage, and indeed legal partnerships, that is not marriage relationships that are formalized, invite the law and the state into that relationship. In receiving public sanction, private desires will be arbitrated by those delegated to do so as public authorities. Individuals, after all, are not individuals in a social and political vacuum. Private desires have been part of public debate, in which law and state institutions are a battlefield for resolving conflicting private desires. Languages of morality, the natural, social order, tradition and modernity are some of the terms in which the discourse is shaped. When apparently divergent worldviews confront each other, we not only see conflicting desires, but shifts in their framing, often through a confrontation between incompatible publics. These debates are, of course, about ordering the social and the politics of that ordering, with all the inequalities, hierarchies, and diversities of the social which make that order coming into play. Delineating and explicating desires of intimacy, their structuring and their multiplicity, their recasting and revalidation are difficult, and nor is their practice easy to study, as is true, of course, of subjectivity and emotion more generally. One possible entry point to look at these trajectories in forms and aspirations of desires are through what I call marriage controversies. The latter may not always be a matter of death, but they are always a matter of life. The life that individuals desire or are directed to lead to. A life as in the compulsory and universal marriage ideal in South Asia, or the implicit heteronormativity that continues to be found across most parts of the globe. While one cannot escape the concerns with gender and sexual relations that marriage controversies are embedded in, they can take us in divergent directions in trying to understand our presence and our past. Hence, I have had to be arbitrary in deciding what I will speak of today. A matter of impact understanding that is common through India, and perhaps even more visible than in the past, is that marriage is simultaneously a relation between two individuals and between their families. But going beyond the idea of affinity, which anthropologists and sociologists of South Asia have dwelt much on, marriage is also a statement of their place in the world, and of the world they would like to see. I will pick up on three intertwined issues that are taking up much newspaper and public space in recent times: self-choice marriage, intercommunity marriage, and the legal age of consent. I could, of course, have also looked at the debate civil code versus personal laws versus separate laws based on gender equality, or at issues of divorce and custody and the questions of matrimonial property, as well as, of course, dowry, dowry violence, and dowry law. Or at the non-discussion around conjugality, the illusion of gender inequality and gender difference, and the refusal thereon to recognize marital rape, or the continuing battle over the illegality of same-sex relations, such that same-sex marriage does not even figure as a law issue yet in India. Yet my selection has not been entirely arbitrary. Intercommunity marriage and self-choice marriage seems to have taken the most space in public discourse. I may, of course, be accused of falling into the trap of not seeing deeper concerns that lie beyond the visible viewer. It is, however, the choice is also based on events and opinions in this domain that the media and popular writings have looked at to conclude that marriage in India has transformed. This is a conclusion I confess, the transformation of marriage, the revolution in love and marriage, as one author writes, while trying to map the shifts. I wish to flag one issue at the outset. The very different construction of the relationship between citizens and state law and state institutions. One construction is when ideally the individual situation is taken as rightly and rightfully accessing or being enabled to access state-given rights and the imagined community of relation as an individual. A second is when the individual is seen as not only embedded in social relations, but the individual as citizen is viewed through the lens of social community, whether of kin, caste, religious identity, or church. And only then a person bearing rights in state law and institutions. In other words, in practice, and possibly in ID, the community mediates between the individual and the state in this construction. Social and political discrimination and versus of identity politics, of course, do give rise to such constructions. But this view is also seen in versions of civil society advocacy. And it constantly appears when issues of gender and generational equality and freedom are raised, to be countered by moralistic arguments or excommunication for concerns for community. I'm going to start with looking very briefly at one representation or forms of representation of marriage as a public institution. In Chennai, marriage banners are part of the wedding process and are increasingly ornate and visible in public space. They are akin to and different from marriage bans in the church or the court or traditional wedding announcements that were placed in public places and doubled as wedding invitations. They brought to public attention private intentions with various limits to the public invited. With these banners, there appears to be no limit to the public. This particular banner is one which is on the main highway in Chennai leading up to a very large marriage hall. These banners also, as this one makes very clear, is not just a public at large. Here, there is very clearly specific political publics which have been invited in as having accepted the marriage. This is a case of DMK party leader presenting his son's marriage, but you have the same with Congress, with the IDNK, and even with the BSP. This particular banner I have actually photographed from a marriage album. Families signify their acceptance even of self-choice marriages or elopements, subsequently by holding a reception and putting up a banner. The latter, these banners convey the status of the families being united, as well as the world outlook of the couple. Thus, in this particular banner, parents of a young Dalit man accepted his elopement with a Brahmin woman whose parents did not accept it. They held a reception, put up a banner in which there are photographs of BSP leaders and, of course, of Ambedkar. an important icon for the BSP. This banner, however, is a little different. It's the friends of a young couple put up a banner for them. There are no signs of caste, of family, or caste elders. But we can see the world outlook which they lay claim to. The images of Baicham Bhutia at the corner here, being the first pan-India football star, of Bhagat Singh, the revolutionary nationalist who was executed by the British, and Che Guevara, the revolutionary who called for international solidarity against capitalism. So we have three different parts of the political spectrum: the DMK, the BSP, and the left student organizations putting up this. And I have to say, even in the BSP banner, the young man was helped in his elopement by his student organization friends from a left organization. Oh, okay. I should just do it later. It's okay, I don't know that. No distractions till we get there. It's radical. We don't want distractions till actually. Okay, the discussion as to whether romantic love, passion, and intimacy have been part of the cultural map and everyday life in India, inside and outside marriage, and various relations between two people has hopefully been put to rest. Romantic love, passion, intimacy, both inside and outside marriage, have been present, as we can see in Sanskrit poetry, in the Sangam literature, and in the many popular stories of star-crossed lovers. However, as in all cultures and places, the dimensions, the experiences of these emotions, and the relationship among different social sections, their articulations, their expressions are all differentiated, layered in relations beyond that of the unit, and they have been changing. At times and in places, these differentiations and changes have been hidden. At other times, they have been dramatic and visible, leading to conflicts, contradictory poles, and transformations in both the inner life of individuals and the public life and politics of that society. These shifts have often followed long trends of socio-economic shifts and economic political crises. Often what emerges at such times may be long present and suppressed practices, undercurrents that were accepted as they remain marginal to that society. However, intercaste and intercommunity marriages are not new to the subcontinent, but nor are they the same as in the past. I cannot elaborate, but briefly, they were often commonly second liaisons or marriages, possibly leading to new lower castes or subcastes. Again, the implications of hypergamy, that the woman has to be married up, meant that at the top and at the bottom of the hierarchy, intercaste unions were the only way in which marriage could take place. These were often obscured by marriages at a distance. And again, lots of examples. Shah talks about it for Gujarat, we have the Nayars in Kerala, etc. Now, these were, of course, strictly regulated intercaste relations, not self-choice marriages, as the caste origin stories suggest. Prem Chaudhary, argues that it was under colonialism, as concerns about land and status grew, and colonial concerns with the morality of natives came into play, that caste boundaries were solidified and regulation of marriage even more strictly enforced. Parry also argues that the regulation of sexual liaisons, the insistence on lifelong monogamy, and the ordering of marriage becomes the dominant morality and value with modernity and with claims to modernity, in which the emerging nation-state plays its own part. However, all the stories of the star-crossed lovers who chose for themselves and chose wrong things to eliminate with men mean that we cannot romanticize the past. In contemporary times, community boundaries have become both more fluid and sharper. Sociologists have for some decades pointed out that marriages are arranged across subcaste boundaries, an anathema a generation earlier, as caste rather than subcaste becomes a unit of identity politics and association. Among the elite, class rather than caste has long been the concern, where at the same time they depend on children's choices emerging from a deeply ingrained caste and class socialization. There are also those of a radical or an earlier nationalist ideology who advocated intercaste marriage and self-choice marriage or were ready to accept them. And here we have both Ambedkar and the leftists and Gandhians, all three in a sense arguing that intercaste marriage is necessary to actually democratize the subcontinent. Today, it is difficult to assess the spread of intercommunity and self-choice marriages even amongst these groups, but it is certainly not as wide as the popular writings suggest. And the popular writings and the media often suggest that economic liberalization has automatically meant social liberalization, and all the young people are now choosing for themselves, and sometimes the older generation attacks them, but otherwise this is happening. However, statistical and anthropological studies indicate that even those who claim to be modern and the most highly educated, those with high standards of living, prefer same-caste marriage and balk particularly at marriage across religion. That young people themselves opt for intercommunity and parental arranged marriages. That young people elope at the same time is of course an indication that there is great diversity of view and action in this field. As ideas of individuality and women's rights have grown, women have also been found, studies have shown, to have chosen for self-arranged marriage due to the desire to have more say within the marital world, the very thing which their in-laws fear. College students, and one doesn't know how true this is, but this is what they have said to me at various times in different cities, spoke of upper caste friends who had married lower caste men as they found them to be less patriarchal. Question mark there. It is of course elopements that do not conform to rules of monogamy and exogamy, and marriages that have self-choice that are at the center of contemporary marriage controversies. I am not going to discuss or describe specific cases of such elopements, whether successful or unsuccessful, whether stopped with no visible violence or leading to what are being called honor killings. But if you look at them as a group, the reaction has been the strongest if the boy is a Dalit or a Muslim, or if the girl is married young. So-called traditional caste and village councils, Khap Panchayats as they are called, of the dominant Jat caste in Haryana and parts of UP, and groups of elders in other parts, community-based organizations, and hence civil society, if you were to use the language of modern political science, have made a range of decisions and public pronouncements where they have simultaneously acted as police, courts, and as legislative bodies. Monetary fines, humiliating punishments for the boy and or girl and or their immediate family, and the marriages declared void. One path taken by parents has been to file FIR, first information reports, which is the first step before the police can act on these situations. They filed FIRs of kidnapping, abduction, and rape against the young man, asserting that the girl was below the age of consent. However, a recent survey done by a newspaper where they looked at cases in Delhi which had come to court, in the Delhi courts, they found that over 40% of the fully tried cases were clearly cases of consensual sex and elopement of a young couple, where the girl's parents subsequently charged the boy with rape. One suggestion from Khap Panchayat leaders has been that girls and boys should be married before their hormones start raging. In other words, they advocate lowering the legal age by when families can get remarried, while at the same time suggesting that the age of consent for sexual relations be raised. In line with this, various restrictions have been placed on young women or been advocated, such as prescribing mobile phones so that they can't speak to their lovers, and including what is really a culturally very conflicting ban, that if young girls are what she might be up to then. There have been demands for laws that will ban marriages within traditionally proscribed limits. So, marriages within the village, marriages within the clan are to be proscribed. These demands have stopped short of calling for a law against intercaste marriage. Perhaps because we know that in the current political scenario, or in what was the current political scenario, but certainly the scenario after independence, such a law would never be accepted. But they have at the same time suggested that if traditional councils take steps against such marriages, they are well within their rights to do so. In these pronouncements and demands in the name of tradition, they have received political support from local politicians across the political spectrum, looking at their vote banks. Across the political spectrum, I should say, basically meaning sort of, you can say, right of center to right, I mean to the center. The unacceptability of intercaste marriages is not an intergenerational conflict, as it's often portrayed. There have been many cases, in Punjab and Haryana, for example, wherein it is the youth of a community who force the elders to take drastic measures against intercaste couples or took that action themselves. You know, Geeta was speaking this morning about this curious bonding amongst young men. Here is another example. In 2012, a group of non-Brahmin educated youth, many of them engineering students, organized a campaign against intercaste marriage. They called it Campaign Against Intercaste Marriage Movement in Tamil Nadu. One of them was quoted in a newspaper report as saying, India is known for its rich tradition that is preserved by communities in the country over the years. Intercaste marriages will put an end to this tradition. So, in the name of diversity, intercaste marriages is wrong. This is, of course, also an argument which geneticists have argued. He said that intercaste marriage was not acceptable, even if the boy was from a well-off family and high caste. However, clearly it is when a Dalit boy is involved that there was most anger and resistance. A leader of the campaign complained that they spoke to young women of their caste who were thinking of such marriages, but the girls were too infatuated to listen to them. And they reported that in 1 year there have been 900 intercaste marriages involving girls of their community in the 10 districts in the Kongu region. One doesn't know how they arrived at those figures. They seem to have covered all the marriages in their community. Videos are circulating on the web, and some of those videos are quite amazing, of their girls misbehaving with charming young Dalit men. He asserted, we want to save girls from sufferings that they would undergo after such marriages. Many girls regret their marriage after experiencing cultural differences in the boy's house. Sadly, after that, the girl's family also does not accept them. So, in this reasoning, that Dalit men will abuse their non-Dalit wives is assumed. And this is also a language and reasoning, if not as venomous, or if perhaps more venomous, that one hears of in the recent Love Jihad campaign, which I will come to later. Another young man said, other caste Hindus have extended their support for our movement, and we are planning to jointly organize an anti-intercaste marriage conference. I wasn't able to find out whether this had taken place. It was supposed to take place at the end of last year. Now, there are three interrelated processes that orient young men to speak against self-choice and intercommunity marriage. One is the spread of caste and community identity politics. Another is the increasing economic differentiation within castes, which seem to make caste identity for the middle and upper castes in particular all the more precious. The third is the declining sex ratio. Intercommunity and self-choice marriages reduce the chances of the less eligible men to marry and receive dowry. However, these young Tamil campaigners deny that sex ratio, declining sex ratio was a factor in their opposition to intercaste marriage. They insisted it was purely a concern to preserve culture that motivated them. At the same time, the head of one of the largest Khap panchayats in Haryana announced that it would actually condone, if parentally approved, intercaste marriages, as sex ratios had made this a practical necessity. At the same time, he insisted that clan and village exogamy had to be maintained. And why would he do that? If clan and village exogamy was not maintained, male inheritance would be threatened by the women who had married within their own village and could claim rights to ancestral land and other immovable assets. Now, if there were only those who spoke against intercaste marriage or against self-choice marriage, despite the numbers that of such marriages that our campaigners in the Kumu region report, if there were only elopements and the subsequent social violence and enforced separation, it is doubtful that these developments would have become a public controversy. Three other factors have been critical, factors that have brought more public sympathy. One has been that local women activists and feminist scholars have been reporting on them, writing about them, and taking up the issue. Young couples have been turning to women's organizations such as AIWA or ALI, that's the All India Democratic Women's Association, and the other is the Association for Advocacy and Legal Initiative, based in Lucknow, whose activists they have known from their educational institutions or their villages. They also turn into various other outfits, one outfit with a name called Love Commandos, which provided them support and protection from their families and caste men. There have been very small initiatives, sometimes a one-man outfit even. One person who called himself the All India Lovers Party that have campaigned on the right of young people to have free choice marriage. Women's and others organizations have undertaken protection, they have undertaken advocacy, but they have also been taking the cases to state institutions, the police, the government, and the courts, asking that rather than caste and family ideology, state law be followed, individual rights be accepted, and vigilantism be stopped. They demand police protection for the young couple, file habeas corpus pleas where the family has separated the couple and hidden the woman, or contest the criminal cases that police institute under the pressure of families that argue that the girl was below the legal age of consent and had been abducted. A second factor has been the media. Print, visual, and digital. All have been important in making and publicizing these marriage controversies, reporting on young men or couples who are living often sometimes in passion, public pronouncements of their desire, have called for security against their families and caste brethren, and have focused on particularly gruesome cases and statements of caste, elected leaders, and sometimes those who have objected to their It's a great news story. Whether the media has an opinion one side or the other, these make great media stories. Opinion pieces have been carried, and an episode in Amir Khan's well-known TV program, Satyameva Jayate, in 2012, was important in bringing this issue to pan-Indian consciousness, though the issue had already been in public space. A third and important factor has been the slowly rising age of marriage for both women and men, which undoubtedly enables self-choice marriage, as do the increasing numbers in high school and in higher education. The possibilities of meeting, dating, and courting, of experiencing love and sexual passion before marriage have grown, although this, of course, was also known to take place in villages and in localities in the urban area. So, caste and community patriarchs have spoken of how mass media and cinema engender sexual desire in young people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sexual desire, of course. And hence, the need to restrict such viewing and the possibilities of meeting, and of course, to lower the age at marriage. In private, they also speak or act against the education of their daughters. So what we find over here is also that those who are calling for traditional rules and regulations are often taking on They demand an increase in the age of consent, such that if a 16-year-old should elope, a partner, be he only 18, can be charged with rape, and at the same time, a lower legal age of marriage with parental consent. The lowering of the legal age of marriage has been opposed by state actors because of their concerns with population control. And at the moment, population seems to trump every other development issue, and in this case, we can only be thankful for it. The first, the raising of the legal age of consent has been opposed by women's organizations, human rights organizations, and child rights organizations, who have in fact asked for a lower age of consent, but they have lost out. So teenagers continue to not be allowed to have sex without marriage and parental consent and without the fear of the conviction of rape. From these cases, what also emerges is that social and political order is not just order, but is the maintenance of class, caste, and gender hierarchies, and of class, caste, and gender controls. Hence, we also see the general violence against Dalits in Jharkhand or in Dharmapuri in Tamil Nadu following an incident of intercaste violence. This is also often imputed to various other upstart actions of the Dalits. The increasing economic differentiation and inequality post-liberalization, the changes in the lives of some Dalits as a result of affirmative action in education and public employment, has then been taken to imply the loss of jobs for the upper caste. This is something that previously found also in your conversations with young men in Haryana. Young women who have been educated and who dare to speak out are similarly also taking away such jobs. Women's organizations who are raising and campaigning on issues of gender equality, all of them are threatening those who have little left other than their status as high caste men. Thus, for them, the control of women and sexuality, lower castes, marriages, and local structures have all to be salvaged and reinforced. In this, we also see the conceptualization of women's agency, both socially and in academic thought, as being very critical. Chakravarti and others have elaborated that legal cases revolve around which man should have the custody of the young woman, not on the woman's choice, not that she has chosen as an independent person and has the right to do so, but whether it is her father or her husband who should have this right. Along with family duty, this idea is clearly viewed as critical to social order. If young women in particular, but men too, young men too, do not remain loyal to the patriarchal family, morality and political order are threatened. And in the words of one Haryana Haq leader, to quote him, if girls are given so much independence, they will start marrying in accordance with their wishes. This will ruin society and all concepts of maryada or dignity. These developments also point to an ongoing social science debate on the nature of the state and state institutions. As indicated earlier, the police filed criminal cases against young men and their families at the behest of the natal family of young women. Some of the personnel were of the view, police personnel, were of the view that parents alone had the right to decide on marriage, that no unmarried woman, or man actually, could be treated as an adult, or that intercaste marriage was not to be accepted and the Dalits were indeed getting uppity. Others did so, even when they knew that the girl had chosen to elope and was not underage, because the parents or the king were powerful and they wanted to retain their possibilities of promotion and furthering their careers. But conflicts between different laws regarding the legal age of consent and of marriage have also forced or enabled them to do so. They were at the same time the occasional policeman and the occasional judge who acted and pronounced in the favor of the young couple's right to choose, simply because they believed in law. and they didn't get into what might be socially wrong. They said this is the law. In other words, state institutions are not monolithic and external from society. Not only are they embedded in the social hierarchies of caste, class, and gender, in that the personnel who run them, such as the police and the judges, speak and act in diverging ways, either due to their own beliefs, reading of the happenings, interpretations of law, or, more likely so, because of the pressures of the socially, economically, and politically powerful with whom they have to live. Or, occasionally also, they act differently because of the pressure of activists who have argued differently. Now, what I would also like to assert that this situation is not only to be found in conditions of what have been called the failed state or non-liberal states, even if it is more visible in them. What also emerges is that marriage controversies have much to do with the ever-present gap between the actual operation of state institutions and the pronounced values that may be contained in them or which have led to the laws of the state across a much wider spectrum of states. These gaps are particularly evident when we look at issues of gender and beyond that, hierarchies of caste and the difficulties in translating the formal equality of law and the Constitution into substantive social, economic and political equality. Thus, the very nature of the political system becomes evident but also makes these marriage controversies. So at this point, I would like to briefly turn to love jihad. Now, interreligious marriage, in particular Hindu-Muslim marriages, have long invited aggressive opposition, often violence, from both Hindu and Muslim parents. What is love jihad, other than being an oxymoron, as many of them did? It is known, actually, only through the campaigns against it. A purported religious controversy to make war through love, the obverse of the 1960s slogan, which was "Make love, not war." And through actions which this campaign has taken against particular Hindu-Muslim couples. In 2009, the police investigated the complaints of a church and of a Hindu group at the direction of the Kerala and Karnataka High Courts, where a complaint was filed that this love jihad is taking place. And the police stated at that time that there was no evidence of such a conspiracy. In the same year, a leaflet was released by a right-wing student group in JNU, known for its left politics, where the Hindu right is constantly trying to make headway. And they alleged this conspiracy. Now, I don't have time to go into the details of that leaflet, but essentially the same issues I will come to again later. In 2013, the Hindu Janajagriti Samiti, or the Hindu Awakening Association in Karnataka, alleged that 30,000 women in the state had been duped by love Romeos as part of a conspiracy to reduce Hindus to a minority. Now, 30,000 women, again, let's read that. In the last 2 years, however, the campaign against a supposed love jihad has gained traction and is being seen in more and more places. In 2013, a campaign and messages in the social media led to the anti-Muslim pogrom in Muzaffarnagar in the name of protecting sisters and daughters. Now try and announces, first of all, it says that Hindu brothers, beware. It's an appeal to you. Wake up, Hindus. Be careful of the love jihad. And what it announces basically is that Muslim men pretending to be Hindus are catching Hindu girls in the web of love, forcing them to convert, marry, have children, and after abusing them physically and mentally, are abandoning them. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but it is actually something which was found across there, and it is amazing whether people believed it or not, the number of young men it mobilized, and old men, but also women from the Hindu right. They also mention the names of well-known actors who are Muslims, who have married and divorced their Hindu wives. Actually, usually their second wives were also Hindus, so it seems this love jihad is really going somewhere. Recent pronouncements and demonstrations which have taken place after 2013, in 2014, after the elections and the formation of the NDA government, again were directed at particular cases, and often those protests and demonstrations were led by women leaders of Hindu organizations. But what is also of great concern is something which was reported in a newspaper last September. It was a report on a discussion on an internet forum of top police officers, not an open internet forum, a closed internet forum of top police officers, in which a number of them, based on their stereotypes of Muslims and Islam, rather than on any evidence, stridently held the view that love jihad was a reality. The story was leaked by other top police officers who were very perturbed by the fact that there was this view which was being held. Now, these themes, which are there in this poster, and which I mentioned, was there also in the leaflet which was distributed in 2009-10 in JNU and in various other leaflets which have come out, in messages which have been circulating in the social media. Recently, this has been happening. What are the common themes and assumptions in the campaign against love jihad and the campaign against intercaste marriage? Both posit the threat to social, political, and moral orders. One posits a Muslim conspiracy, while some anti-intercaste marriage campaigners have suggested a Dalit conspiracy. So just Muslims are trying to seduce Hindu women in order to get more, increase the numbers of Muslims. Dalit men are trying to seduce upper caste girls in order to break upper caste respectability. Both the campaigns and the stances explicitly reify boundaries between communities, between Dalits and other castes, between Hindus and Muslims, but also work simultaneously towards a broader unity of those who may be designated as Hindus. Both suggest that in inter-community marriages, women and wives will be unhappy and mistreated. So they argue that it is for gender concern, it's their concern for the women of their community that they are raising this issue. They imply that abuse and violence against women happen only in marriage across community boundaries. The basis for this view is also explicitly propounded. Inter-community marriages not only mean cultural compatibility, but not in self-choice marriages, women and girls will keep to their designated place and remember their duty and role vis-a-vis family and community. How then will there be any mistreatment of them? In the process, domestic violence becomes a non-issue in inter-community marriages, as well as a basis to demonize another community and justify the control of women. Charu Gupta draws parallels with the love jihad campaigns of today with campaigns which took place in the 1920s in UP. Campaigns which were led by various Hindu revivalists campaigns asserted an exclusivist grammar of difference in the intimate regimes of love and marriage. Simultaneously, images of the passive, victimized Hindu woman at the hand of inscrutable Muslims silence and erase heinous activity and desire. Any possibility of women exercising their legitimate right to love, choice, and conversion was not enough. The last is, of course, a point, as I've already indicated, which has been highlighted by many commentators and activists. Despite the insistence by many of the young women who these campaigners have sought to save and protect, that either they have not converted or they have not been forced into marriages, these campaigns continue because they rest on the assumption that women are incapable of making sensible choices. So, returning to where I started. The political and cultural economy of intimacy, personal relations, and marriage are at the center of social and political structures and trends. Public controversies over the intimate spheres of life draw out the manner in which intimate life and public politics make each other in discourse, structure, and practice. Both the politics of the refusal as well as the shifting trajectories of the marriage that young people desire emerge from both the normative and material dimensions of marriage, which the material dimensions have not been able to elaborate on, and patriarchal conjugal contract that is embedded in caste and class borders. And one could actually argue that they are need not be so concerned, because in fact the patriarchal conjugal contract seems to persist even in the self-choice marriages and often in caste marriages. On the one hand, marriage and gender controversies show the limits of democracy in India in terms of the desirability, let alone possibility, of a democracy that would emerge on substantive equality and freedom, and a common sense of gender equality and freedom through questioning that. On the other hand, the very fact of these controversies point to the spread and strength of democratic processes in India, wherein social movements and young people, among many others, are asserting their right to change tradition and the refusal to accept earlier hierarchies. That's all.
That the substantive aspect of democracy in India, we are yet to realize that. We have not been able to see that. My observation is this, that we need to link it to the larger re-emergence of Hindu nationalist politics in India. This is at the very heart of the Indian national politics today, and this Hindu nationalist politics. How there has been mobilization of the votes on these lines also in the last election, 2014 general election, where Madam actually set aside the question of communal mobilization, the polarization that took place in India in the modern history. But here I think this gives us the understanding that how it is linked to the larger Indian politics and how it operates at different levels and it helps Indian politics. So it is not just a simple question of the gender and freedom, but larger democratic process, and also how it acquires or how this kind of understanding or this kind of articulation actually gives us this power or capturing the power. It becomes a tool for capturing the power, and this is linked to the nationalist politics. That is something which I think.
You did start off with some caveats in And this is simply because you're talking about self-choice marriages, and how do we then not really talk about the lesbian and gay kinds of unions and the ways in which those do or don't fit within this framework of thinking about self-choice and the ways in which it can offer some kinds of different challenges. So really the question is to see how you would extend the argument made to look at the ways in which these are expressions of some kind of self-choice, but self-choice in a very sort of neoliberal moment. Yeah? As are these two about the lovely health choices. And I think that, do not take that into consideration runs the risk of, perpetuating heteronormative assumptions. Just putting it out there.
Okay, so more questions right now. Well, the first point is in fact exactly what I was arguing, that right from when we look at the marriage banners in Chennai to when we look at the campaigns, the reactions from political parties to intercaste marriages and the demand for half panchayats, as well as the 2013 state program which took place on the basis of the proposed Rajya, that there is a double sense in which we can look at the political process. One is the electoral process and electoral politics, and the other is in terms of political order being rooted in a particular social and moral order. On the question of the gay and lesbian marriage issue and of gay and lesbian relations and the acceptability or non-acceptability within the Indian context, one of the reasons that I did not pick it up was that would have made my job much easier. The response and the sort of refusal to accept the idea of same-sex relations, when we look at just the way things went in the court from the High Court to the Supreme Court, is one where you will find people will argue, okay, that we need time, we will think about it. Those, however, if they are not able to accept even self-choice marriage, which they think is okay because they're heteronormative, I think we see much more clearly, in a certain sense, where they are coming from. That is one reason. The other is, there is a lot in terms of these self-choice marriages which I have not picked up on. Okay? At one level, it is just the fact of choice, which they are protesting against. Again, as I said at the start, it may appear that I am just falling into the trap of only looking at what is the most visible. But I think the reason I did this is I wanted to suggest that even where heteronormativity is accepted, it is not a heteronormativity of choice that is accepted. And that was the simple point which I was trying to make. Does it end up reinforcing heteronormativity? Because I have not discussed the whole issue around. See, first of all, even before same-sex marriage comes, the question of acceptance of same-sex relationships, that is not accepted. Well, I don't think so, but I also know that accusation can be made against me, and it will be made because I have not discussed it.
I think more than heteronormativity, it's also about what we understand by choice.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, I agree. I have not actually discussed choice. I've not really gone into that whole thing of how do we think of choice. What does choice mean? Is the fact, what I could have gone into also is that even self-choice marriages, the heteronormative self-choice marriages, to what extent are they choice at all? To what extent are they free choice? I hinted, for example, that many upper caste parents will accept their children choosing for themselves, but they assume that their children will actually choose according to the values of caste one can go into a discussion, and that discussion I think is extremely important in terms of what is choice at all. How do we theorize it? How do we conceptualize it? And I think when we get into that, then the question of sexuality, of gender, of same-sex versus heteronormative become absolutely central. I will agree with you. But I didn't even go into that discourse of what does choice mean. I was just talking about how the very idea of choice is the question. I just want to put it, I think.
Yes, me too. Rajni, I'm wondering about something. There's 4 sort of phenomena here. The one you didn't speak about, the same-sex relationships. One being the car panchayats with their business of exogamy outside the village and outside the Gotra and all this business. And then 2, one being the Dalits, the anti, Dalit, whatever they call it, the love jihad equivalent, but based on caste in Tamil Nadu, and then the love jihad here. Now the latter 2 are similar in many ways, in terms not just in the phenomenon of how they present what they're saying, but also in terms of the underpinnings that he was speaking about, which is that in both instances, there is a deep underlying contestation in both the economic realm and the political realm. The Dalit middle caste battle in Tamil Nadu has been going on for a long time. Ever since the Brahmins were out, this has become the dominant struggle. And then in this case, of course, we know what this is. I'm not seeing a similar thing in the case of the car panchayats. One could argue, on the sex ratio and something, although, what that argument is quite, I'm not sure. And then the same sex is totally different from that. There is no such contestation in the realm of economics and politics in that. So, should we be thinking of these 4 as similar, or actually as quite different patterns, where the language of desire, the control of sexuality and gender are being used in quite different ways? What they are in the case of the other 2 may be something else than they are in this case. And therefore, should we be, in as much as we think of them together, should we also be differentiating between them?
Whether it is intercaste marriage, whether it is interreligious marriage, whether it is same-sex marriage, and another issue which I did not discuss, but that is a different sort of controversy completely, which is the thing which is divorce, and the question of the rights of women to divorce and the question of marriage. So these at one level are very similar in that they can tie at a more abstract level to ideas of social order and the way in which social order and political order and hierarchies are embedded in each other. But yes, there is a huge difference in terms of the economics and politics of each of these. And if one is trying to do a cultural and political